We are now heading into week 2 of the NBA season, and what a first week it was for our very own Chicago Bulls, who still remain undefeated as we head into this week. The question is how long the Bulls will be able to hang on to their winning streak as the competition starts getting a little more challenging than what they've faced to date in both the regular season and preseason. So in this video, we'll be talking about the Bulls' schedule of games this week and the keys to each game and things to be looking out for. So what's going on, everyone? You're listening to Bulls Central here. Hope you're all doing well. The Bulls have 3 games scheduled for this week, starting tonight in Toronto against the Raptors. I'll be having a live chat and post-game video for that as always. Then the Bulls are off for a few days and come back to face the Knicks on Thursday in Chicago, and then close out the week where they host the Utah Jazz. So clearly much stiffer competition than the Bulls, who they faced in their first 3 games, really, when it comes to the Knicks and the Jazz, in my opinion. The game against the Raptors tonight, who are playing without Pascal Siakam, should be another relatively easy game for them, but it is on the road, and the Bulls struggled a bit in their first game of the season on the road in Detroit. So we'll start with tonight's game. Now, the Toronto Raptors, as of right now, are 1-2. Again, they are currently, without my opinion anyway, their best player in Pascal Siakam, who is yet to actually play this season. But even without Siakam, and despite losing Kyle Lowry, this is actually a pretty young and talented team. You know, their number 4 pick in Scotty Barnes has been showing up very well in just his first 3 games in the NBA. He's actually leading the Raptors in scoring at 18 points per game and 10 rebounds as well. The Raptors also have OG Anunoby, Precious Achiuwa that they received in the sign and trade deal with the Heat, which was a huge pickup for them in my opinion. And they also have Chris Boucher, Gary Trent Jr., and arguably their second best player aside from Siakam in Fred VanVleet. So this is actually a pretty talented team. They're just a little young and without experience, but it's a team you can't take lightly because of how quick and energetic they are. I think the keys to this game are the Bulls just keeping up with the pace and speed at which they play at, despite the Raptors being a scrappy defensive team. You know, the Raptors are one of the better defensive teams in the league, along with the Bulls. And we saw that the Bulls struggled mildly in that first game against a young, decent defensive team in the Pistons. The Bulls struggled to find their rhythm and their offense when they weren't running in transition in that game as much as we saw in the preseason. The Pistons did a good job at slowing down the pace and disrupting the Bulls' flow of offense. So for a team like the Raptors, who are better than the Pistons, the Bulls can't get too careless with the ball on offense, thinking they're just going to outrun and outscore these guys. Yes, the Raptors are not a great team on offense as of right now. They're second to last on offense in the East, so the Bulls really should be able to beat this team in a shootout, but you also have to ensure you're not allowing them to disrupt the speed of play that the Bulls are so successful at. And really the other key to this one is locking down Scotty Barnes, which feels weird to say because he's a rookie and so inexperienced, but the dude has shown that he can score in a hurry and can crash the boards as well. I would have to think that the Bulls will likely have Patrick Williams guard Barnes for most possessions, since Patrick is usually tasked with guarding the opposing team's best player, although he might be a better fit in guarding OG Anunoby, while DeMar DeRozan guards Barnes, since DeMar is a little quicker when it comes to his lateral footwork and moving into the paint. But all in all, this still should be an easy win for the Bulls, despite being on the road, and yes, the Raptors being a better team than they faced in the first week of the regular season. The Raptors, yes, still talented, they're still just a little too young and inexperienced for a team like the Bulls, and especially without Pascal Siakam. The Bulls have to take advantage of a shorthanded team and take care of business and walk away with the win. Then the Bulls will face their tougher competition, starting with the Knicks on Thursday, and it's always fun to see Derrick Rose come back to town and take on the Bulls. Not only that, but Taj Gibson will be returning to the United Center as well. The Knicks started off their season 2-0, but then had a pretty loss last night actually against the Magic. For me, I don't think that the Knicks are going to be as good as people are making them out to be. I talked about that a lot in some of my offseason videos, but make no mistake though, they are still a strong team, and with a coach like Tibbs who preaches hard-nosed defense, they're still going to make noise in the East. What's funny about the Knicks though, so far this season anyway, and again it's only been 3 games, is that for a team that was one of the worst teams on offense last season, but one of the best teams on defense, they're actually leading the league so far in points per game thus far, and have actually been giving up a substantial amount of points at the same time. Granted, their first game went into double overtime, so it's a bit misleading, but so far you can tell this Knicks team has improved on the offensive end, something they struggled with last season, with Randall really being their only scoring threat. But now they've added Evan Fournier and Kemba Walker, 2 key scorers, and you're already seeing strides from Obi Toppin in his second season. So I do expect this to be a high-scoring game, and for the Bulls, the key to this game is going to be their defense. defense. Normally against the Knicks, I would have said the opposite in that they need to ensure not to let Knicks control the pace of the game with their stellar defense, but it's a little different this season, and the Bulls have to be bullying and pestering these guys on the perimeter. And again, another big task for Patrick Williams yet again in having to guard Julius Randle. At least I assume that will be Patrick's assignment. Not really too worried about Kemba Walker or Derrick Rose for that matter, as that's the beauty of having a strong defensive point guard in Lonzo Ball. Same with Caruso coming off the bench. RJ Barrett, he's decent, has improved his offensive game to an extent, but he's no match for someone like Zach Lavine. The one matchup I am slightly concerned about is Vucevic and Mitchell Robinson. Now, Robinson will never be able to outscore Vucevic, it's just not part of his game, but historically, Vuce has struggled against strong defensive centers who are great rim protectors and rebounders. And of course, Vucevic has struggled with his scoring so far this season, but at the same time, it hasn't really mattered all that much for the Bulls thus far, as they've been able to find scoring in other areas. And as I mentioned before, Vucevic has really stepped it up on the defensive end so far this season when his shots are not falling. It is going to be a battle in the paint for rebounds between those two, so this should be a fun game overall because it'll be the Bulls' biggest test yet this season. It'll be at home in front of a hyped United Center crowd, and there's always a bit more excitement when Rose comes back to town. I would love to see some minutes of Io on Derrick Rose in this game at some point. I'm sure the crowd will be going nuts if that ends up happening. Then finally, the Bulls close out the week against the Utah Jazz. The Jazz, as of right now, have only played 2 games, and they did win both of them. And of course, despite the Jazz having a disappointing run in the playoffs last season, they did finish with the best record in the league last year. They have an incredible duo in Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert, one of the more seasoned and better point guards in the league in Mike Conley. And they're also just an incredibly deep team with guys like Jordan Clarkson, Bogdanovich, Joe Ingles, and now they've also added Eric Pascal as well. So for the Bulls in this game, you're talking about going against one of the best defensive teams in the league, one of the best individual defenders in the league in Rudy Gobert, and we all know the Bulls can get up and down the court in a hurry, but when you're going against a team like the Jazz, that is never going to be an easy task. And with Gobert in the paint, the Bulls are really going to have to rely on their perimeter game on offense. I can't remember if this was pre or post trade deadline, but I believe the last time the Bulls faced the Jazz, Gobert put up 9 blocks against us. So Vucevic is going to be spacing the floor more than usual, because if there's one thing that Gobert's defense lacks is his ability to get out and defend the perimeter, and has struggled against centers who can hang around near the paint and play the pick and pop and getting out to the perimeter quickly for a shot, which obviously Vucevic can do. Then of course it's going to be a showdown on offense between Donovan Mitchell and Zach Lavine. Me personally, I think Lavine is a better overall player between the two, which I know I'm a bit biased, and I know most people would argue Donovan is the better player because he's actually been able to win and doesn't put up empty stats. Well, Lavine hasn't had the luxury of playing on a good team, and thus far, now that he actually has a talented roster, he has certainly proved that that was all a bunch of nonsense. I'm also looking forward to seeing how Lonzo stacks up against veteran Mike Conley. I said it last week, but it is such a nice feeling to have a point guard where you feel confident in his ability to go up against some of the best point guards in the league. So as you know, every week in these preview videos, I give my predictions for the Bulls record. And last season, I was pretty terrible at predicting how this team would do because the Bulls were all over the place last year. But last week I was spot on, which isn't really something to be proud of or brag about because I think most people felt the Bulls would go 3-0 last week, and it would have been disappointing if they did. So for this week though, I actually think the Bulls will go 2-1, getting handed their first loss at home against the Jazz. I think the Bulls will beat the Raptors pretty easily and win a hard-fought game against the Knicks to go 5-0. And although I think they can match up well against the Jazz, but after winning 5 straight, the Bulls will fall to the Jazz. But I do think it'll be a close game and likely a low scoring game with both teams playing locked in defense. I want to know what your guys' predictions are though for this week. Which games do you think the Bulls will win or lose? How do you think the Bulls will show up against better competition? Let me know in the comments, and as I said, I'll have a live game chat for each of these games and post-game videos, so make sure you're subscribed to the channel as I do post daily Bulls content. Thanks again for tuning in, guys, and I will catch you in the next one.